Hey church, I hope that you're doing well and staying healthy. This week we sent out some very important information that I'd like to highlight real quick before I share my thoughts on John 10. The elders have sent out an email with a link to a volunteer form. This form has been a long time in the making, and it's critical for us as a church going forward. It's important that each of us not only attends church, but also is church. Each of us has been called to emulate the life of Christ, and that does involve finding ways to serve. So we'd like you to help find a way for you to serve, which is the point of the volunteer form. We've listed out many of the opportunities for service that we have at Arlington, and we're simply asking that you fill out the form and let us know what areas you are interested in. So please do take the time to fill out this form so that when we do get back to normal, we can hit the ground running. With that, I'd like to turn my attention to John chapter 10, verses 1 through 10, which I'll read for you now. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep do not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life, and have it abundantly." This metaphor of Jesus as a gate sits uncomfortably on our ears. We are used to thinking of and singing about Jesus as a shepherd, but in these verses, he is not. There is a shepherd, which if you keep reading, Jesus says he is that shepherd. But in these first 10 verses of chapter 10, Jesus is trying to make the case that he is the gate in this analogy. It would be easier to jump ahead and to interpret these words with Jesus as the shepherd, but I'd like us to sit in confusion with the disciples and ponder on what it means for Jesus to be the gate. I agree with the disciples that it's a weird parallel for Jesus to draw, but since he did, I will start by assuming the idea of Jesus as gate has a value for us to uncover. Perhaps the easiest place to start is to remember that time when Jesus taught that he was the way, the truth, and the life, and how no one comes to the Father except through him. We spend a lot of time thinking of Jesus as truth and life, but maybe not quite as much time thinking of Jesus as way. This idea of Jesus as gate seems to be another way of identifying himself as way, or means. He is the means by which we come to God. So insert here an image of a cross bridging a canyon of sin that separates us from God. But as soon as that makes sense, there is this tidbit of a detail in John 10 that makes me question everything. When Jesus calls himself a gate through which we come into the shepherd, he also speaks of us going back out. Coming in makes sense. We come through Jesus to God. But then we go back out? And does that imply we leave God? Is this some weird sheep yo-yo kind of a thing? You go to God, but then sometimes you leave God, and then you come back, and are we supposed to rinse, lather, repeat ad nauseum? That doesn't seem right. That almost seems like permission to morally backslide, or like an abuse of grace that Paul vehemently disavowed. So maybe it's back to the drawing board. Notice in particular that there are 3 reasons Jesus sees himself as a gate: salvation, having life, and pasturing. Specifically, he says we come in to be saved, and we go out to find pasture. And this combination of salvation and pasture seems to sum up what it is to have abundant life. So we come to God through Jesus, and we find salvation. I feel like we have a decent grasp on that idea. But what does it mean to then go back out through Jesus to pasture? We need to remember that these sheep in this metaphor don't live in a pen. They come in through the gate to be counted and tended to and protected, but they do most of their living in the pasture where they are nourished, where they socialize, where they sleep, and well, where they live. In that sense, I think Jesus is recognizing that just as we come through him to find protection and shelter and salvation, we also go back out into the world through him to be nourished and to live our lives. Through Jesus, then, we have salvation and a way of life. To go out the gate of Christ is to live our lives like and for Christ. With that in mind, I think the most important question I can ask is, which side of the gate are you on? Have you been outside so long that it is time for you to come in and rest? Have you been put outside of this gate for such a long period of time that perhaps during this period of isolation and sheltering, it would be good for you to come inside and come closer to God and refresh your spirit? Maybe you find yourself bombarded with stress and expectations, fear and anxiety, and it's time for you to find shelter inside of the gate. If so, come in and rest with God. Spend time in prayer and contemplation. Listen to the words of peace and healing that God has to offer. After all, 1 Peter 2 describes the shepherd as the guardian of our souls. So let God guard you in these times of trials. On the other side of the metaphor, however, perhaps it's time to go out into the world, empowered by Christ, to live a life for God. It is not enough to be saved and then not live. James is right to remind us that faith without works is dead. We are meant to live. So consider going out of the gate, and when you go in the Spirit of Christ, to live as he lived. It is this very idea that compelled us to send out the volunteer form. Look it over and consider how you could step outside of your comfort zone through the gate of Christ and find a way to volunteer. And beyond your life at Arlington Church of Christ, consider how Christ can shape your actions at work, at home, and everywhere you go. Enter each and every day of your life through the gate that is Jesus, and you will find a way to live your life for Jesus. So this week, I hope you spend time figuring out which side of the gate you are on and which way you need to go through it. Jesus is the gate, and we have to understand where we stand in relation to him. There is no shame in going back inside to find rest and shelter. There is nothing wrong with going inside to be tended to and cared for, to have your wounds healed, and to find shelter in a time of storm. That's okay. And just as much, it's okay to be inside the gate long enough that it's time to go back out and to go out into the world. But when you do go, remember that you go through Christ. We don't go into the world to live our lives for ourselves. We go to live them for God. So figure out which way you need to go, whether that's back in or back out. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May God make his face to shine upon you and give you peace.